since the demise of WCW and ECW in 2001, the overall feeling in professional wrestling was that of want. A want and desire for more alternatives to WWE. And in the last 19 years, we've seen a lot of alternatives come and go and try their best. From Impact, Ring of Honor, Lucha Underground, and AEW, to the XWF, World Wrestling All-Stars, and Wrestling Society X, there's been a lot of good and bad in the world of wrestling outside of McMahon land. But this week, we're not talking about one of the many companies that sprouted up in the aftermath of the Monday Night War, but one that showed up right at its height. When you look back at the last big wrestling boom in America, you see it pretty much only revolved around the big three. With all the success that WWF, WCW, and ECW were having between 1996 and 2001, I'm shocked there weren't more companies showing up for a piece of the action. Instead of where we are now, in which multiple feds are starting up and doubling down to fight over a smaller audience than before, imagine how insane things could have been if we had this much activity back when wrestling was at its most popular. Well, at the turn of the 21st century, a man named Howard Lipkind wanted to strike while the iron was hot. Lipkind, who was the executive producer for the American Wrestling Federation in the mid-90s, decided to give it another go with WXO Wrestling, a company dedicated to providing a true alternative to the larger companies. So what was it all about? Let kayfabe Commissioner Ted DiBiase and the rest of the gang explain it to you.
I want to bring good family entertainment, wholesome entertainment, back to wrestling.
A new era in professional wrestling and so family-friendly. Taking it back a little bit to the old days, but adding some brand new stuff as well.
What's that you say? A family-friendly departure from the Attitude Era? A mix of the past, the present, and the future of wrestling? How unbelievably original! WXO had some of the best stars money could buy, which isn't saying much considering all the biggest names at this time were already under contract somewhere else. They ran a single TV taping in Lakeland, Florida in late '99, aired 3 episodes on syndicated TV at the beginning of 2000 with a 4th in the can, then disappeared without trace. Along with a very similar big red letter, it looks like the XWO is a very familiar story with the XWF. And although WXO got their show on TV, at least the XWF letters stood for something.
And all I ever hear about is this WXO. What does the X stand for? I don't know. I don't care.
So we know how the story ends, but what is WXO's legacy? Was this forgotten fed cut down before its time, or did it deserve to go in the bin? Let's look back and find out. The inaugural episode of WXO Wrestling aired during the 3rd week of January 2000. If you're wondering why no one talks about this company's arrival, let's just say there were bigger stories breaking at the time. Your announce team for this fledgling company was the pairing of former WCW presenter Cruz and Stan Lane, best known for being part of the Fabulous Ones, the Heavenly Bodies, and the Midnight Express. The best way I can describe these two is passable. I've heard far worse commentary, but this is by no means great. And let's be fair, they don't exactly have the best material to work with. They actually have fairly decent chemistry, and by that I mean Cruz spends a lot of the time just agreeing with what Lane says.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Nice point, and right into a nice analogy.
It's Al Green.
Right, good point. That's a very good point. That's a great analysis, Stan. Oh!
Now, as I've often pointed out, a promotion's only as good as its first impression. So with that in mind, how did WXO decide to kick off this brand new era of professional wrestling?
Look at the guns on his partner. This kid is named Danzig, as you can hear.
Jesus. Eric Watts and John Zandig have a tall order ahead of them as they're taking on the pairing of Scrap Iron Adam Pearce, who with his attire and his flowing brown locks is almost unrecognizable from the multiple-time NWA World's Champion he'd become, and former member of the Fantastics, Tommy Rogers. The last time we saw Tommy on this channel, Adam Blampier and I erroneously called him by the wrong last name, and he was teaming with Marty Jannetty. I'm having a hard time figuring out which of those two things is worse. Right away you can tell this federation suffers from the same crowd dubbing issue I've seen so many times before with other shows I've covered here. If the term is called crowd sweetening, then WXO had the equivalent of diabetes, because they are egregious here. Just listen.
Well, so far he's been roto-rootering the competition here.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am the CEO.
He's got the current look, you know. He's not doing the cowboy thing like dear old dad did.
My name is Al Green.
Well, you've got to be, and we're all impressed with WXO Wrestling.
Every moment and move on this show gets the biggest pop you've ever heard, as if they're all seeing Hogan slam Andre for the first time over and over again. It's relentless, it's unending. Their boisterous approval's even more impressive when you realize just how badly these shows were attended, which the crack production team made zero effort to try and hide. The pairing of Watts and Zandig wins the day after the founder of CZW hit Pearce with a basic elbow drop out of the referee's sight. So revolutionary! We then cut to the back and see a mystery man come out of a fancy car. Cruz and Lane are either idiots or they're idiots, as they seemingly have no idea who could be rocking this moist gray t-shirt. After the break, we hear a speech from Ted DiBiase, who according to the storyline is the commissioner, the CEO, and the CFO of the company. Man, someone's got a hard time delegating. In the speech, he addresses his goal to bring wholesome content back to professional wrestling and also tries to explain how people will get paid.
You know, we live in the day and age where a lot of wrestlers are on guaranteed contracts, guaranteed money. Well, in the WXO, what you're guaranteed is the opportunity to make money.
Ted, your gimmick is all about how much money you have, okay? You were the $1 million man. You were trillionaire Ted in WCW. If you're trying to bring all the big names to your organization, maybe guaranteed contracts aren't a bad place to start. Our next match sees a guy named Maniac Manny Fernandez taking on Shawn Hill. Manny, who's not to be confused with the Raging Bull of the same name, sure is a crazy one. He shows up in a straitjacket he takes off himself. He does the handshake fake-out thing with a fan. He takes down his straps way too early in the match and spends the rest of his time adjusting his gear after every move. He crotches himself on the top turnbuckle and laughs it off. And he kisses dudes. Doo-hoo, so wacky. As for his opponent, Hill looks like he came from the Rocky Maivia, Prince Iaukea school of babyfaces, so he doesn't have much going for him either. We cut to the back to see DiBiase sharing some words with the mysterious stranger. Oh man, the moment's so intense the cameraman can't even bear to take like 2 steps to the left and try and see the guy's face. Oh, it's so intense! After the break, DiBiase addresses the small yet somehow raucous crowd to announce WXO's newest acquisition, in case it wasn't obvious before, Dan the Beast Severn. Let's see if the WXO can do what the World Wrestling Federation couldn't in 1998 and present this UFC legend as a charismatic crossover star.
I've had a great deal of success my entire athletic career. Whether it be stepping out onto an amateur wrestling match or climbing in that steel cage for one-on-one, no-holds-barred action.
Severn thankfully doesn't go long before he's cut off by a quintet of other guys, including Hack Myers, Mike Enos, Barry Darsow, and the real star of the segment, former WCW job guy Al Green, who's now dressed like Taz and wearing a mask for some reason, but is still called Al Green. Well, you know, reinvention doesn't happen overnight. The Beast predictably makes short work of Green when a wild Barry Horowitz appears to really round out the crew of bland, uninteresting talent. A miscommunication leads to Darsow and Enos duking it out as the announce team scrambles to make us care by explaining that they're friends. So there's the high point of your big pilot episode, a bunch of jobbers confronting Dan Severn ending in a big confusing brawl. By the way, Barry Horowitz is never seen in the WXO again. I'll tell you one thing they could have done though to save this segment, just have Dan come out to his old WWF theme. The action picks up when the Blacktop Bully takes on Nash. Scott Nash, that is, who looks like Big Sexy after being left in the dryer for too long. Sheesh, I thought Davey Meltzer in the UWF was a lame attempt at a dig. The poor guy doesn't even get to show off one of his 6 moves as Darsow has his way with his opponent until the Enos returns and dinks his former friend, I guess, in the head. The referee sees all this but lets it go, and I think Little Nash is going to win by countout, but we never get an official decision as we go to commercial break before the count's over. I want to make a WCW 2000 joke here, but even they weren't so flippant with the structures to do something that boneheaded. Our first main event in WXO history is a tag team match playa as Apollo and Adonis, the Heartbreakers, take on the Bodies, whose names we never ever get to learn across 3 episodes. But one of them helped train CM Punk and then played Donald Trump on an episode of Raw, so there's that. The match ends when things get physical with a fan in the front row. This prompts that fan's twin brother to join the action. But why is he so far away from everybody else? You're telling me he couldn't have got a ticket with his brother? It's not like there weren't seats available down there. We'll get back to those twins in a little bit, but before we do, it's worth noting the Heartbreakers are accompanied by a woman named Gia Moore, who's wearing a top inspired by the Michelin Man and flaps her arms so much during the match it looks like she's trying to fly away. Gia's presence prompts Stan Lane to go more into WXO's mission statement of being family friendly.
As we said before, we're going to do things tastefully here. It's going to be tasteful. You're going to see some beautiful women. That's why I'm here. But I tell you what, it's going to be done the right way, Chris.
Yes, at WXO, they respect the ladies, which is why they seemingly go out of their way to sound as creepy as possible when talking about them.
Oh, you know the gangster loves a lovely lady, and she does look so nice. I'll go 2 out of 3 with Gia anytime, okay?
I bet you would.
In a cage, in a cage.
Gia is looking absolutely gorgeous. We're trying to get a look at her now, and you're right. She seems to know what she's doing and like what she's doing.
A little bit later, we will take a look, the first look ever at our new broadcast colleague by the name of Jennifer Hart. I know that we're looking forward to that.
I know I am. I saw her backstage. She's hot.
But if you want to see something beautiful on camera, you're going to see it. You know, it's Jennifer Hart coming up.
I like her.
It was scary to see you up there with him. I was afraid for you. I wanted to hug you just in a brotherly way.
Jeez, at least Jerry Lawler could be kind of witty when he was catcalling women. Episode 2 begins with WXO's resident shooter, Al Green, who comes out to a theme that sounds like it belongs in a SNES game.
He's 6'1", 260 pounds. He's from right here in Tampa. He's been wrestling 11 years.
So we've already given him lame music and a shitty mask to hide his face. Now let's expose the fact he can't talk either by having him awkwardly shuffle his way through another promo.
I just want all you low-budget rednecks to understand one thing. It doesn't matter to me if you're some shoot fighter, if you're some karate.
Green handily defeats classy Chris Nelson, a jobber whose ability in the ring is actually far better than what his look suggests. Not a bad night for Mr. Green here, until he gets punked out yet again by Severn later in the show. Back to the job squad for you, not quite Taz. Taking a break from their own product for a moment, WXO treated viewers to some bootleg-looking footage of an All-Japan match at the Tokyo Dome between the team of Johnny Ace and Bart Gunn and Jun Akiyama and Kenta Kobashi, or as the announcers refer to them, Kenji Okasami and Mitsu Arakawa, an interesting choice as those two were fictional and long dead respectively. But it turns out they couldn't even get the names of the Japanese wrestlers correct. See, by this point, Gunn was wrestling as Mike Barton in Japan, a detail that was apparently lost on our boys on commentary as they had to try and correct the mistake in post-production. Keyword, try.
We're glad to have him back. He's going to come back over here. Michael Barton, always a tough competitor. In Tokyo, Michael Barton and Johnny Ace in tag team action. Stan, it's a different style of wrestling there at the Egg Dome, that's for sure. And these two guys have more to show us.
Oh my god, that is so bad. That is so bad. I've seen some lousy editing in my day, but that is just blatant. Guys, have you never heard of putting some kind of video footage or full screen graphic over that audio to cover it up? I'm probably going to do it 2 or 3 times in this video. It's not hard. In true old school fashion, they say the actual finish of the match for next week's episode. Then we get a promo from John Laryngitis himself, who says that he and Gunn Markton are headed to the WXO very soon, wrapping up with his soon-to-be iconic catchphrase.
If you don't got it, get it. If you don't get it, figure it out.
Side note, Ace and Barton's tag team name was The Movement, which is pretty appropriate. 1.5 episodes into this show, I feel like I'm having a movement right now. Look everyone, it's Fred Otteman, and wouldn't you know it, he's too big and fat to get out of his tiny sports car. Boy, talk about being typecast.
Everyone needs to drive a vehicle, even the very fat! This was the largest auto that I could afford.
Other guys in the card that week included the aforementioned Hack Myers, Pat Powers, and Scoot Andrews, aka the Black Nature Boy, who aside from the name, borrowed literally nothing else from the Ric Flair gimmick. In fact, Jay Lethal doing a Flair impression in TNA once makes him more of a Black Nature Boy than Scoot ever was during his 11-year career. Powers takes on Mike Enos in singles action, and in response to what happened last week, the match ends when Barry Darsow gives Enos a receipt in full view of the referee, but this time we actually see the conclusion of the match. Boy, we sure see a lot of Darsow on this show. Not only is he embroiled in this silly feud with Mike Enos, he's also the poster boy for the show's biggest sponsors.
That's Priceline.com on the internet. Name your own price. It's bigger than big.
Man, the way he's being portrayed on this show, you'd think he was the booker or something. What's that? Oh, he was the booker! Oh, that explains a lot. We meet a new member of the broadcast team named Jennifer Hart, who the announcers have spent all episodes slobbering over in a family-friendly, tasteful way, of course. I can't tell if Hart's just inexperienced in front of a live crowd or is flat-out terrified to be there. Last week's main event was so nice that evidently we had to see it twice, as the Heartbreakers, who by the way bear no resemblance to a tag team of a similar name, took on the Bodies once again. This match also ends in controversy as Adam Pearce interferes on behalf of the Bodies. Gia Moore looks really upset by this. If you've enjoyed seeing the long-haired scrap daddy so far, then you're going to love episode 3 because he's all over the damn thing. First he gets called out by Ted DiBiase at the start of the show, and he and Tommy Rogers are forced to wrestle the Bodies, who, to reiterate, have yet to be referred to by their first names. The match ends with a move the cameras miss, but it seems that Pearce has turned on his mentor for reasons. Is he a face? Is he a heel? Apparently even they don't know. Then DiBiase announces that Pearce and the Bodies will be teaming up in the main event against a mystery team. Got it? Great. But if you don't, figure it out. But the allure of a surprise reveal is too much to bear for sweet Stan Lane, who wants to go to the back and investigate.
Well, hang in there, or I'll be right back. I'll go find out just for you. This will be a scoop, because I'm the man who can do it.
Taking Lane's place for the rest of the episode is Jennifer Hart, who, God bless her, has no earthly idea what she's gotten herself into. Her commentary makes Susan St. James from WrestleMania 2 sound like Joey Styles in his ECW prime.
He says he's going to get to the bottom of this. He's going to find out. He's on a journalistic journey. Now, Chris, tell me a little bit about that. Why did he get tossed out of the ring?
What did he tell you, that he grew up but his car didn't?
That's exactly right. And I said, well, you need to get a bigger car. He just can't seem to hold him down.
Well, that's a very good point, Janet.
Our next match sees Adonis, no, not this Adonis, but an entirely different wrestler with the exact same name, cool, going against Billy Fives. A fine match between two indie guys from the region, that's all there is to say about it, but seriously, 2 Adonises? That is Bush League. I will bet you anything they had a fight over who had to lose the name that night, and they still couldn't decide. Next, Fred Otteman's in a handicap match with a couple of guys and mows through them as if they were part of the set of Flair for the Gold. Well, it's a better look for him than fat guy in a little car. At last, our main event has arrived. Ted DiBiase's joined the announce team to really bring down the quality, as Adam Pearce and the Nobodies take on their mystery opponents, the Shane Twins. Yes, it turns out the big fans who got their dicks stomped in at the end of episode 1 are wrestlers and are out for revenge. Considering how these guys looked against the Nasty Boys at LOD more than 2 years after this, I'm not looking forward to it. After a decent match, the future wrestling penises easily dispose of their opponents, but the show ends on a cliffhanger when we find Stan Lane beaten down in the backstage area and covered in bruises, or maybe they're hickeys. So who took him out? Rikishi, the driver of the white Hummer, the 1989 Denver Broncos? Well, we never find out what happened, as this was the final episode that made air before the WXO shut down, vanishing as soon as it appeared. Apparently, Howard Lipkin's silent partners never came through with the money they'd promised, so the company had no choice but to fold. According to Lipkin himself, there were several promising things in place of the company. A video game deal with Acclaim, a toy deal with original San Francisco toy makers, even a pending move to cable TV, all nullified because of a lack of funds, which is kind of ironic considering who the figurehead guy in charge was. When you examine the death of professional wrestling companies that come and go like shooting stars, it's easy to look at them and say, well, they had the biggest botches, or the worst wrestlers, or the worst booking, but honestly, I couldn't find that with WXO. I couldn't find anything truly awful about it, or anything great either. With this, it was just... WXO didn't have the worst set, or the worst production value, or the worst wrestlers, or the worst announcers. Okay, besides Jennifer Hart. But they didn't really have anything worth tuning in for either. This company came at a time where any wrestler who was worth a damn had already been picked up by the World Wrestling Federation or World Championship Wrestling. For all their internal problems near the end, ECW was a more stable place of employment than taking a chance on this new organization. Who the hell was going to carry this company to any kind of height? Who would be their top star to rival Stone Cold or Goldberg or Sting? Dan Severn? Adam Pearce pre-NWA? Barry Darsow? The tag team that were never given names despite wrestling 4 times in 3 weeks? Who the hell were fans supposed to latch on to? It's possible to be family friendly and not boring, but listen, they couldn't do what Johnny Ace asked them to and figure it out. Speaking of Ace, maybe it was a blessing in disguise the movement never got to appear on WXO television. Considering the Brawl for All and the Butterbean fight basically forced Bart Gunn to flee the country in order to find work, I don't think his career would have ever recovered if he came back to this place. Not to mention, I think John Laurinaitis' career turned out pretty well after going to WCW as an agent. You know, Brian Damage over at Ring the Damn Bell made a very good observation about the company many years ago. It's a promotion about nothing, and man did he nail it. What titles did they have? Nothing. What crowds did they draw? Nothing. What stars did they have? Nothing except for Dan Severn, maybe. What did the company literally stand for? Nothing. Maybe if the money didn't run out, it could have had a chance, but I guess we'll never know. In the end, WXO is not to be remembered for giving the business a bad name. In fact, it's barely to be remembered at all. It was a blip on the radar, an aberration of blandness, lost in the sea of the edgier, far more compelling content in wrestling at the time, both for good and for bad. And yet, I just wrote more than 3,400 words about it, and just produced a video about it that lasted more than 20 minutes long. So what the hell do I know?
It doesn't matter to me if you're some shoot fighter, if you're some karate, if you're a boxer. Just remember one thing.
I think what he's remembering is last week.
My name is Al Green.